Not ready to commit to a weekly podcast? You don't have to. A mini private podcast funnel gives you all the power of podcasting in the audio format without the overwhelm, and it works so well as a part of your sales system. I'm going to break down exactly what a mini private podcast funnel is, how it works, and why it could be a game changer for your business. So what I mean by a mini private podcast funnel, what I'm talking about is utilizing a private podcast as a lead magnet in your business. And there's 3 goals with a mini private podcast. And we'll dig into a little bit of how it differs from your typical normal, consistent weekly show podcast. But the 3 main goals of a mini private podcast funnel are to 1, capture the lead. So capture their email. You're using this as a lead magnet. So people are opting into it. They're giving you their email so that they can get access to the private podcast feed link and then go and listen. And then the second thing that it's meant to do is really nurture those listeners who are opting in and now coming to your private podcast feed into a specific offer. And this is one of the main ways that a mini private podcast funnel differs from your typical weekly consistent show, is it is a little bit more intentional in bringing someone on a specific customer journey into a offering, into a way to purchase or work with you. That's why I refer to it as a funnel, because it is meant to capture them as a lead and bring them down through the trust building process into conversion. That's the third goal component of the mini private podcast, is to have a conversion into a sale. And we could also really think about it as just a conversion into a decision. So by the end of the private podcast series, the listener should be able to make a decision on whether this is for them or not, whether you're the person to work with or not. And it can really almost take the place of things like sales calls or spending a lot of times in the DMs going back and forth about whether this is for me or whether it's not for me, because the structure and the strategy around what you end up building in the mini private podcast series is intended to answer those questions and intended to build the trust and authority you need so that by the end of it, someone can make that decision and have that understanding. So again, the 3 components, purposes: capture them as leads, to nurture people throughout the mini series, and then to convert or not. They can now make a decision on whether this is for them. So that's really the foundation of what a mini private podcast funnel is and the purpose it's meant to serve in your business. I truly see them as almost like the new era of lead magnets and replacing the boring PDF downloads, the masterclasses that no one has time to sit down and watch. It is intended to be something that is more engaging and can keep someone's attention, because having someone's attention, which we know through the research, how powerful audio content is in capturing and keeping someone engaged and keeping their attention. If we don't have their attention, then it's really hard or harder to bring them through the sales customer journey process. So that's why I love these so much. And I've worked with multiple clients who we do manage and we do produce their weekly show, but we have also launched and we now have mini private podcast funnels in place because the intention is different. The intention is more specific and more intentional than their weekly show. And I'll give an example of a mini private podcast funnel from one of my clients, Holly Haynes. So she has her podcast, Crush the Rush, and then we launched a mini private podcast funnel that was intended to lead into her group program called Anti-Social School. So Anti-Social School, the goal around the program is to help people learn strategies to build their businesses off of social media. So in planning the private podcast that would lead into that program, what the private podcast is called Ditch the Social Drama. So the intention behind the private podcast is really to introduce this framework and to introduce what this looks like so people can connect to, hey, is an antisocial strategy something that I want? What is an antisocial strategy? What does that look like? Does it seem feasible? Does it seem like something I can do? And helps them to answer some of those questions and get to know Holly through the episodes. And I'll link it here so you can go check it out, to get to know Holly through those episodes, to get to know her personality. How does she teach? How does she connect? And again, by the end of the series, they can make that decision on, is Antisocial School the program for me? Is that the next step for me in growing my business? Does that make sense for me right now? And they're able to make that decision. And we've seen in the data, we've seen how it's impacted her launches of that program, how it has served as a great way to bring people into her world who are interested in ditching social media and to opt into that private podcast to learn more and to see how that flows into then the people joining the program. Sometimes it can be hard, just like with podcasting in general, it can be hard to directly connect when someone listens to something and then purchases from you. But we know for her students that while we can't necessarily always directly say, like, because they listened, that is why they bought, we do know for all of her students that the mini private podcast, that everyone who joined did listen to that. Now, there may have been other customer journey points, right? They may have been a Crush the Rush podcast listener. They may have connected to her on social media. They might be on her email list. But we do know and we can see that for everyone who did end up joining the program, that component was a part of their customer journey, that private podcast. So the other cool thing about mini private podcasts, and another way that you can utilize them, is in her case and after the fact. So after this is launched and after she has now run this group program multiple times and she's gotten results and she has case studies and she has testimonials, is she's actually gone and recorded testimonials in those case studies, and those have now been added into the private podcast. So now when new leads come in, when new people come in, they now are also hearing those case studies and those case study episodes, which are really powerful. The other thing I love about this is if someone had opted into this private podcast funnel at some point, if someone had opted into it, maybe it wasn't the right time for them then, or maybe they didn't make the connection to the Antisocial School program for them at that time. When these case study episodes are published, that episode now pops up in their feed. So they have added the podcast into their Apple platform. And I'll talk about this, but my favorite platform for hosting these is Hello Audio. It makes it so easy. I have a link down below that you can go check them out. It makes it so easy to create these and then to get the link for people to add it into their Apple podcast. And so then it's right there. It's in their podcast feed. And so when they publish a new case study, when she publishes a new case study, that pops up again for them. And they're able to see, oh, there's a new episode here. Let me go listen. And so it almost is like a way to re-engage those people. It's a way to re-engage those people that might have opted in at one point, may have not been the right fit for them then. And potentially the new episodes or the updates or the case studies or whatever happens within this mini private podcast could be what maybe then tips the tables for them. Maybe then they can say, oh yeah, no, I'm listening to this. I'm seeing how this connects. I'm ready to buy, right? So it can be a way to re-engage those people as well, which is amazing. Okay, so that's a real tangible example of how these things work and how you can use them in your business. So a little nuts and bolts of the process and what you need to build them and to have them set up. So the first thing is you need to have an email provider. I love Kit, or formerly ConvertKit. And so I'll put the link below, but you need to have an email provider who gives you the ability to create landing pages where you can capture emails. And whether that's on your website or you're utilizing the landing pages within your email provider, you got to have a way to capture their name and emails so that you do get their email. And then you have to have a way to actually deliver the private podcast feed. Again, my favorite way to do this is using Hello Audio. It's a podcast host. And so they make it really easy for you to upload the audio and to upload the cover art and create that podcast feed that then you can link to in that confirmation email. When someone opts in, they get the link to that podcast. And right now, private podcasts aren't supported at all by Spotify. So when they get the email, they actually get a link to a Hello Audio page that will have a button for them to add it to their Apple podcast, or they can utilize YouTube Music as well. So if they are an Android user, they can add it that way, or they can utilize the Hello Audio platform to listen to it as well. So it gives options there for if you have the non-Apple users. So you have to have that component. You have to have the way to host the audio and deliver the private podcast feed. And then typically on the other end of it, you're going to have some type of nurture email sequence. So you're going to have some way to continue to engage with people and to nurture them specific to this lead magnet, just like you would with any lead magnet. And then they will ultimately go into your email list from there. So those are the main components. You have a way for people to opt in, you have the actual way to host the audio feed, and then you have some type of nurture of those people who have come through on the back end. And then of course, the actual like recording of the episodes, mapping out the episodes, the strategy, all of that, figuring out what's going to be most impactful here. So the actual like recording and editing and getting the final product together, creating the cover art and all of those things. And I have a course that walks you through all of it. So all the setup and then also the strategy of it. And I actually have a custom GPT in the course that you can utilize that I have taught, and I have put my strategy that I've worked with over dozens of clients to create these and create these in their businesses and to make them effective. And so I have taught that to my custom GPT. And so you can utilize that to help you speed up that process of figuring out and mapping out those first 5 episodes. It's kind of the purpose of that GPT, is to really help you map out, what did those episodes look like? What do those 5 to 6 episodes look like? What should I talk about? And you put into it, like, here's my end product, here's my end goal, and it'll help you speed up that process. So I have that built into the course to help make that easier, because that's one of the biggest things that comes up is, okay, I want to do this, but I don't know what I should talk about, or I don't know the best way to put this together. So that helps you with that component. And then it teaches you all the nuts and bolts too of the actual recording, what microphone to get that's not going to break the bank, how to easily edit these episodes, how to create your cover art, like all the different components that you're going to need to actually create the private podcast itself, and then go from there. So it'll get you from point A to point B, where you're at here thinking like, okay, this sounds like a great idea. I would love to incorporate this in my business. It teaches you everything you need to create your own mini private podcast funnel and to start utilizing it in your business. So I'll put the link for that below. And then if you want to learn more, I also have my own mini private podcast about these, so meta, called Leadcast. And I'll put the link to that below too, if you want to listen to that and hear more about how to leverage these, how to use these, the strategy behind them. But leave a comment if you have any questions at all that have come up for you around private podcasts, mini private podcasts, how they work, how you can utilize them in your business. And I'll see you next time.